And that was a pivotal conversation that took place. I can remember it as if it was yesterday, and it happened a very long time ago. And so I decided that I wasn't going to get in any more trouble.
Power to Live More with Joe Dodds.
Welcome to the Power to Live More podcast, all about productivity, organisation, well-being, energy and resilience. I'm Jo Dodds, and I started this show to enable interesting people to share their stories about how they use their power to live more, and by that I mean to do the stuff that they want to do more than the stuff that they need to or should do. It's about creating a life for yourself where you have the energy, health and space to be happy and fulfilled, spending your time as you'd like, whether that be at work, home or somewhere else entirely. That's your choice.
Hello. My name is Ellie Dodds and I'm co-presenter, and today Joe's interviewing Graham Frost. Graham and Joe met about 8 years ago at an Engage for Success meeting and have kept in touch ever since on social media. Recently, something Graham posted on Facebook reminded Joe of how interesting his life has been, and she kicked herself that she hadn't invited it on here sooner. Graham Frost has spent his life making heart-shaped decisions. He left his whole family at age 17, experienced a life of petty crime, homelessness, and a young offenders institution before recovering from testicular cancer, all before the age of 25. Nowadays, Graham speaks to audiences of mainly young people, helping them to make better decisions. Back to the studio.
Today I'm interviewing Graham Frost. Welcome, Graham. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you very much for inviting me, Joe. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Lovely. So we met each other, I was trying to work it out, I reckon probably about 8 years ago, through Engage for Success, which is nothing to do with what we're talking about today. But as I think we said before we came on, that we met each other through that, but then through social media, we've got to know each other a little bit better. And yes. You posted something recently that just prompted me to sort of kick myself, wondering why I hadn't invited you to the show before. So really pleased to have you on. Start by telling us a bit about who you are and what you do and where you do it.
Okay, so I'm these days I'm a professional speaker. I work in schools and prisons, mainly with young people who maybe need some help to make better decisions. And I actually speak about heart-shaped decisions is what I did. And I came up with that kind of concept, I suppose, only as recently as last year, when I was thinking about, what really defined what I speak about. And I came to the conclusion that all the major decisions that I've made in my life have been made more with the heart than with the head. And, right. I think my life has been more interesting and rewarding as a result of that. And so that's what I am a professional speaker now, and working with young people generally to help them to actually make better decisions, because I believe that the decisions you make when you're younger shape the rest of your life.
Mm-hmm. So tell us a bit more about what you mean by heart-shaped.
Well, I think I was talking to somebody recently, and they said that somebody that's a little bit different to me, and they said that you have thoughts which turn into feelings, and then they turn into actions. And I thought about that, and I thought, well, actually, no, I don't. I tend to have feelings that turn into thoughts. I feel things before I think them. If that makes any sense. Mm-hmm. And I think you feel in your heart and you think in your head. So that's how I would define that. So when I hear a piece of music, for example, it gives me a feeling. So I tend to like music that doesn't have any lyrics sometimes, because you can make it. It makes you feel in a certain way. So I particularly like jazz, for example, because of the way I like music, because of the way it makes me feel, not necessarily because of the words.
Yes. Yeah.
I don't know if that helps to explain it at all.
Mm-hmm. So
as you said, that this is sort of a fairly recent, almost realization in terms of what you want to do and why. You have got quite an interesting and complex story that's led you to here. So just sort of tell us a bit about how, what your life's been like, what you've done, and why and how you've ended up here.
Okay, so I started off. I was born into a fundamentalist Christian religion, which had very, very strict rules. And so, for example, we didn't have radios, televisions, we didn't have recorded music. So I grew up in the era of the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, and people at school were talking about the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, and I didn't know what they were talking about because I wasn't allowed to listen to it. And so things, it's a bit like, I suppose, a young person these days growing up without any technology, without a mobile phone or something like that. So, and also my friends were very restricted. My friends were really restricted to my family and the church. So if I wanted to be friendly with somebody from school and go around to their house after school, I wasn't allowed to. And I started questioning this at quite an early age. Why aren't we allowed to do this, or why aren't we allowed to do that? And all my parents were saying, well, because I said so. And I know a lot of parents used to say that, and maybe they still do. And so anyway, when I got to the age of 17, I decided I was going to leave. And by leaving, I cut myself off from my family completely, because almost all my family at that point in time were in the church. And so they were told, if somebody leaves, they almost, to all intents and purposes, cease to exist.
Wow.
So I went off into the big wide world, and I actually got a job in a pub in West London. And while I was working there, because I lived there as well, I actually got a job and somewhere to live. So I was sleeping above the pub and working behind the bar. And I wasn't even old enough to be working behind the bar, but nobody asked me how old I was. And I fell in with some bad company. And after about probably less than a year of being left home, I was actually committing petty crimes and stealing things. And eventually, me and my friend, who was kind of he was the one that was suggesting and all the ideas, and I was the one that was actually going and taking all the risks. Got arrested and was remanded in custody, and didn't learn my lesson. And eventually, at the age of 19, I ended up in Borstal, which is a young offenders institution, which they've actually been abolished now. They don't have Borstals anymore. And while I was in Borstal, one of the officers who was there to sort of look after us, if you like, said to me, he said, I don't understand why you're here. He said, because you're not a criminal. He said, we get young lads that come in here, and we know that by the time they get to us, there's not a lot we can do with them. And he said, but you're not like that. He said, so I want you to go and sit down and have a think about what you're going to do with the rest of your life. And that was a pivotal conversation that took place. I can remember it as if it was yesterday, and it happened a very long time ago. And so I decided that I wasn't going to get in any more trouble. I haven't, apart from 1 or 2 speeding fines and 1 or 2 parking fines. That's pretty much, that's been the limit of my law breaking ever since. And so
before you carry on, can I just stop you and just ask a couple of questions? Everything you've said so far just seems so full of sort of strength of character. At 17 to leave your whole sort of experience and go somewhere else just sounds so like, so many people wouldn't be able to do it. How did you do that? How did you feel confident enough to do it, or did you just feel you didn't have a choice?
I don't know. Yeah, I think it was that. I've spoken about this quite a few times, many times, and people say, "How did you do it? Just go off at 17?" Because I was a very, very young and naive 17.
Yeah.
And I felt that I had to. Yes, it was just that I felt that I had to leave one life in order to have the life that I wanted. I didn't even know what I wanted at the age of 17, but I knew what I didn't want.
Yeah.
And I knew that if I stayed where I was, I would have been married by the time I was probably in my very, very early 20s, and you were expected to have large families, and there wasn't a whole lot of love necessarily in the organisation at all. And so I just thought, I didn't know what I did want for quite a long time. Probably I didn't know what I did want. I kind of fell into things, and there's never. I mean, for a long time there really wasn't a plan. And so I just went off. I thought, I've got to escape. It was almost like escaping from one prison, and then 2 years later I was in another one.
Yes, yeah, and that discussion with the prison officer sort of basically saying, this isn't for you, and you're sort of saying now years later that was a pivotal moment, but that just sounds almost too easy. How have you sort of taken that, if you like, into what you're now doing? Because I mean, he was right. Obviously, you weren't a criminal, were you? That was sort of, I guess, he picked on that bit that was true, I suppose. But you're working with youngsters and in prisons now, and I presume you're wanting to have that moment with people like he had with you. Can you remember why it stuck with you so much at the time?
Well, I think it was because actually while I was in the Borstal, I really probably hadn't learnt my lesson, because there's about 200 lads in there, and I was very young and naive. I was probably most 19. I was probably less grown up than most 19-year-olds would be. I was still very much finding out who I was, and so I fell in with this other guy who was who was my, if you like, protector, and I think he wanted me around him because I gave him a degree of, people thought, oh, he's okay. And what happened was that one day, so I was knocking around with this guy who I thought would protect me in case anything went wrong. And one day he actually beat somebody senseless. And I wasn't there when it happened. And he was immediately taken and taken out of that Borstal. I never saw him or heard from him again. Right. But they also pulled me in, and because they thought I knew something about it, because I was always with him, and they put me in what they used to call the punishment block, and I was in solitary confinement for 24 hours, and so I had time to think. And then after about a day or two after that was when that conversation happened. So it was like, do you really want? I thought, do I? And I probably had the conversation with myself. Have I actually escaped from one prison to end up going back into another one all the time?
Yeah.
I don't. I mean, I can't. It's a long time ago, but I do remember coming out of there. I mean, it wasn't too bad. Wasn't too bad a place to be, because it was in the countryside, and it wasn't. I mean, you weren't locked into cells all the time. We had a relative amount of freedom. But, and I remember walking out of there for the last time and thinking, that's it. I'm not going back there again. Although, funnily enough, I have been and visited people in prison since, and I now go. I now go into prisons and visit, but I know I can get out again.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Oh, right, okay. So you've come out and you decided to do something different. Continue the story.
So anyway, what happened then was that I carried on working in the pub business for quite a while, and then I met a young lady, and we kind of settled down together. And she was a little bit older than me, and one day she said to me, she said, "Graham, why don't you get a proper job?" I said, "Well, She said, "I've got a proper job." She said, "No, you haven't." I was sort of flitting between different jobs in catering, and so I said, "I've always fancied working on the railway." And so she said, "Well, why don't you apply for a job on the railway?" So I said, "I don't know how to do that." So anyway, I thought, well, how can I apply? So I actually wrote a letter to the catering people on the railway to King's Cross, and I always remember, because I wrote it on pink paper with a green pen, because that was the paper we had in the house and the pen we had in the house. And so, and I got a reply, and I got asked for an interview, and because there was no online applications or anything like that in those days, this was 1978, and I went for an interview and got the job. I started on the railway in January 1979 as a steward on the restaurant cars, and within 6 months of starting that job, I started to feel a little bit ill and not quite myself, and I was losing weight, and eventually went to the doctors, and long story short, I was diagnosed with testicular cancer.
Wow.
And so I had then 15 months of I had an operation and chemotherapy and radiotherapy, and I was off work for 15 months or more than that. And yeah, obviously I'm okay now, but that was the, and I remember, people say, oh yeah, you can't cure cancer with positive thinking. No, you absolutely can't. But I think there is an element of, you have to decide that you're going to fight it.
Yeah.
And I did. So I thought, well, I'm not going to let this beat me. I haven't got to where I am now. I was relatively happy with my life the way it was, and I hadn't got. I thought, I'm not getting this far. I'm letting this beat me. And so I did come out the other end of that, and then things progressed. I stayed in the railway industry for 24 years altogether, and my career kind of ended up in charge of the catering teams on the Scottish Pullman train, and did lots of really interesting work. And then I got into working in training and development on the railway, which was a big change when somebody offered me that opportunity in the 90s. And so I've just celebrated 25 years of actually working in training and development in different kind of ways, ways. So I think you have to. It's about sort of taking the opportunities that are offered to you, but sometimes you have to go and look for them as well.
So, how long is it since you had your own business? So, as you say, you started training and developing on the railways, but you now work for yourself. So, how did that transition happen?
So, how that happened was the first time around. Anyway, I've been working in training and development on the railway for 7 years, 7 mostly very, very enjoyable years. Did some fantastic work that I'm still very proud of. And then there was the big word that comes in, a restructure happened, and the job that I was actually doing was done away with, and I was offered some other jobs, which I didn't really want to do. So I said, what other options are open? They said, well, you can take voluntary redundancy if you want to. And so I said, how much am I going to get if I leave? And they told me, and at the time in 2003, it was a reasonable amount of money.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, I'm going to take that, and I thought I'm going to go and try and do something different. And so then I came out of the railway, and after a few weeks of sort of applying for jobs and one thing and another, and then I went to America. I have some friends who live in Orange County in California, and they said, why don't you come out and spend a few days with us? So I got a cheap flight and I went out to California, and while I was in California, I was sort of walking on the beach. And I remember it was February, and it was Venice Beach and places like that, and I thought, you know what, I'm actually going to have a go at doing my own stuff. I'm going to have a go at having my own business because, why not? And so I started off doing customer service training, and then I was contacted by. I didn't, it sounds very glamorous, but it actually wasn't. I just about managed to make ends meet for about the first sort of year to 18 months, and I had my redundancy money to fall back on, and then another railway company contacted me, and I actually went and worked for them. It was supposed to be for 3 weeks, and it turned into over a year, completely revamping and delivering all their induction training. And then I did some work for another railway company as a contractor. And then I had a family circumstances change. So at the time, my ex-wife's grandson turned up and came to live with me which is a whole nother story. And so I thought, well, I can't, when you're self-employed in my line of work, certainly in those days, you have to be very flexible about traveling and literally be able to go to the other end of the country. And I couldn't do that anymore. So I got a job again with a financial services company as a learning and development consultant. And, I quite enjoyed a lot of the work I did there, but I didn't particularly enjoy the culture of that industry. And so in the end, I lasted 5 years there, and then walked away from that in, I think it was 2011, and then thought, right, I'm going to start again. And so I've done sort of bits and pieces of training work. That's how we met, because I got involved with the Engage for Success group, because because employee engagement is something that I've always been very passionate about. I think it's part of the heart-shaped decisions thing for me, is working with people who actually care about who care about you and care about the people who work for them. And I have experienced that, and I wanted to help other people experience it. And so that's where my career went. And then I've done lots of training work, all sorts of different soft skills training over the last probably 10 years, here and there for different people.
Yeah.
And the training work kept rolling in, so I kept doing it. And then I thought, is this really what I want to be doing for the rest of my working life? Have I got a message to get out there? And that's when the heart-shaped decisions thing started happening. And I decided this year was going to be the year that I really focused on getting my speaking business, properly off the ground, because it's really about helping people and being of service. So then, of course, actually having a really good start, and then the COVID-19 situation happened. But I've actually carried on building relationships and quoting people for work that is going to happen once we get back to a situation where we can go and speak to people face to face again.
Yes, yeah. So you had the sort of positive story to what's been happening, I guess. Tell us a bit about how you have sort of maintained that relationship building, the sorts of things that you're doing to get yourself out there in what's quite a sort of challenging type of business. I think, speaking, a lot of people talk about, you can't make money speaking, or, everyone wants you to do it for free or whatever. Give me a bit of your perspective on it. Clearly it's coming from your heart. It's something that you feel is really important. But what have you been doing to make that shift and build that business?
I think the thing I did this year, which I've never done before, I've never properly done before, because I'm very good at going at things sort of half-assed a bit. But this year I thought. Back end of last year, I was actually invited to join a mastermind group by a friend of mine who's a successful professional speaker called David Heiner. And I thought to myself, this is actually the right time to be doing this. It's actually a paid mastermind group, so it's not, it's not just a group of people that get together and have lunch and talk about their business. It's actually you're actually paying some money to be part of it. And I've never done that before. So I took up the invitation, and so it's almost like I've now got a team of people who are supporting me, and we're supporting each other. So one of the hardest things about being self-employed is that I actually quite like being part of a team, and I have that. Excuse me, I have that now, where I didn't. I probably never. I've always been a bit independent.
Yeah.
So and what have I done? Well, I've actually focused on building relationships, particularly with people on LinkedIn. It's amazing how many people will actually accept connection requests on LinkedIn, and then you can gradually build relationships with them. And I've also, so I've got if you like, two target markets really, which is schools and prisons, and that's what I've been focusing on for the last probably 3 or 4 months.
Yeah.
And that's, they're the sub kind of people I'm talking to, and it's amazing how much help you get when people know that you've actually got a story that can help people in, younger people who need some direction in life.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's coming together.
Lovely. That sounds really positive. So how do you go about getting done what you need to get done? You mentioned that you've not always sort of pushed yourself. How do you make sure you do the things that you know that you need to do? What's your sort of day-to-day organisation strategy?
Well, I'm not sure if I've got a complete strat. No, I have. I do actually have a daily to-do list, and it's even got to the point now where it's on my. My diary is on my phone. I made the change this year from having a paper diary. It was a big step for me to go away from having a paper diary to having my diary on my phone.
Yeah. But
what the diary does on my phone is it sends me emails when things have got to be done, and it gets on my nerves. So, it gets things. I'll get much more done now than I ever used to, because and I also have a system of rewards. So I say to myself, okay, so if I get this particular, I don't like marketing and sales. I like to, if I could get somebody to do the marketing and sales for me, I'd just go out and do the speaking. I would be happy. But you can't.
I think we're all the same, aren't we?
Yes, I don't like doing. I don't like doing sales and marketing, but it's got. I've actually had to realise that this has got to be done. You've got to bite the bullet and just get on with it.
Yeah.
So if I send, if I send out, I don't know, 50 or 60 video messages to people, I say, right, now I'm going to go and have some lunch, or just something simple like going and having a cup of coffee, or going across there's a Greg's literally 5 minutes walk from my house. I'm going to reward myself with a sausage roll and a cup of coffee from Greg's for my lunch, rather than having a healthy lunch which I've got in the house. Or I go for a walk. I go for a walk. Okay, so I've got after this call, I haven't actually been for my walk today, so I thought, right, I'm going to have my conversation with Joe, then I'm going to do another half an hour's work, and then I'm going to go for my daily walk, because a walk is a reward to me.
Yes, so definitely the rewards come in. Lovely. So you said something, and I've now just completely forgotten what it was that I wanted to further ask you about. That's not like me to suddenly lose my train of thought in the middle of the thing. I think you got me on to thinking about healthy walking things. So you talked about your diary and the fact that your emails, you don't like notifications. You could just switch them off.
It makes me do it. I think I had 4 different notifications came on my phone to tell me that I was speaking to you today.
And you turned up on time, so they obviously do work.
Yeah, well, I'm always early. I hate being late for anything. So I was actually here about 4 minutes to 2.
Oh, very good. Oh, no, I remember what it was. You said sending video messages to people. Tell me more about that.
Okay, so I've just found that quite a useful thing to do. So I will record a short video on my phone, because I do everything on my phone. I've got the most amazing phone, and I think everybody has them now. I like, everything I do on video is actually done on my phone.
Yeah.
So I'll record a minute video on my phone, and I'll just send that out to a targeted number of people on LinkedIn as a message, because people get fed up with getting text messages on LinkedIn. So I just send a short video, and I get quite a lot of good feedback from it.
Brilliant. That sounds like a great idea. I'm glad I remembered what it was, because that's a really interesting point.
I just hope everybody else doesn't start doing it now.
No, good point.
Else.
Well, don't worry. No one listens to this podcast. No one will start doing it. It'll be fine.
I'm sure they do.
Oh, brilliant. So are there any other tools or apps that you use that you'd recommend?
Any apps?
Any tools or apps? Yeah.
Not really. No, I've just used. I don't have like a particular favourite app for organising myself or anything like that. No, Apart from the calendar on my phone.
Yes, yeah. As you say, phones are just. I saw a quote that I put on Facebook a long time ago that said, our phones are like mini computers now, which, as you say, are so different to how things used to be.
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah.
I can remember in the mid-90s, I remember saying about 1995, 96, I said, well, I can't imagine any circumstances under which I would want a computer or a mobile phone. Now my mobile phone's hardly ever out of my hand. I do most of my, I was actually in France doing some volunteering at a refugee camp about 4 years ago, and there was a chap there who has a consultancy business. He was staying in the same youth hostel as we were, and he actually said that he has a consultancy business which he runs from his phone.
Yes.
And he travels around the world all the time doing one thing and another, but he's earning money while he's traveling.
Yes, yeah, brilliant. So you touched a bit on how you keep up your energy to do the things that you need to do. You talked about walking. I guess having talked about having cancer so young, has that had an impact on the sort of general shape of how you've lived your life and how you've looked after yourself since?
It probably didn't. It probably didn't to begin with, because I actually, funnily enough, I continued. I used to be a smoker, and I remember saying to the doctors when I had cancer, would you advise me to take up? Because I didn't even want a cigarette when I was having the treatment. But everybody smoked in there. I'm talking about the sort of early 1980s. Everybody used to smoke. You were strange if you didn't smoke. And I had enough of being strange when I was in my sort of church in my childhood. So I just wanted to be like everybody else. So I smoked. And no, I didn't look after myself very well at all. I used to smoke, probably drank too much. And yeah, until in fact, I didn't give up smoking until 2005. And I gave up. I still have a drink, but I drink less alcohol now than I've ever drunk in my life. Just the odd beer now and again, and the odd glass of wine now and again. I drink a fair amount of water, and I eat reasonably healthy. But I probably in common with many other people, been eating just a little bit too much over this lockdown period.
Oh, yes, absolutely. We keep saying that. It hasn't stopped us though.
No, I know, and I really must. My partner says to me, she said, it's not good for you. And she's like, really, she's a bit younger than me. And she gets a lot of exercise at work because she's always rushing around at work. But no, I need to, I'm not massive, but I'm probably about half a stone heavier than I'd like to be.
Yes. Yeah. So what about learning and improving yourself? Your life has changed so many times and you've done so many things that have been quite a leap for you. How do you think, or how have you continued to learn and improve yourself and be ready to do those things?
Well, I think most of the learning has been done once I've actually made the move. I've jumped and then learned how to do things like starting my own business. I had no idea. I worked in the same place for 24 years, and I didn't even have a CV when I left there because I didn't need one because I've just been promoted gradually through the ranks there. So I think one of the biggest things I did was join Toastmasters International in 2003. Because that helped me to actually hone my public speaking and actually helped me with my confidence massively. And I stayed a member of Toastmasters for quite a long time. In fact, I only left about 2 years ago. And the organisation I belong to now is the Professional Speaking Association, which actually helps me, because I see a lot of other speakers that are better than me. And they also, the PSA also helps you with the nuts and bolts of running a speaking business.
Yes.
And I do read to a certain extent. I mean, but I'm not a massive reader of personal development books. But I have read a few. I've read, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. That sticks in my mind. I read that quite a long time ago. And I actually like to read biographies of people who have been successful in one way or another.
And what about those days where it goes horribly wrong, where you have a tough day, things don't work out? How do you deal with that? I mean, again, you've had so much adversity that you have just dealt with. I'm expecting you to go, I just carry on. But can you identify how you deal with those things?
Yeah, I can. I can actually, because I've thought a lot about that over the years. People say, "Oh no, you can't have a bad day. Everything's got to be fantastic all the time." I said, "No, it hasn't. No, that's ridiculous. You can't have." I feel quite passionate about the fact that it's okay now and again to have a bad day. Because the sun doesn't shine every day, does it? And I had some friends who went to live in Spain about 10 years ago, and they came back after 2 years because they were fed up with the sun shining all the time. And that's true.
Yeah.
So I think you have to allow yourself. I allow myself to have a bad day now and again, and just not do anything. I just feel sorry for myself, and I think, right, okay, you've done that. Now get it out of your system. Tomorrow you get on with what you're supposed to be doing.
Yes. Yeah. Lovely. Thank you. And last question: what about those days where you have the opportunity to live more, and that's where I talk about getting to do more of the things that you want to do and less of the stuff that you don't want to do? What do those days look like for you?
Well, I think, my ideal day would be, sort of work-wise, my ideal day would be where I've actually spoken to a group of people, or maybe, I might go into somewhere and speak to 2 or 3 groups of people in the space of a day, and tell my story, and actually see a few light bulbs coming on in people's heads, and you actually know those people are going to go away and do something slightly differently as a result of listening to you. And in my personal life, I actually can't think of anything more I'd rather do than actually spend the day with my partner.
Lovely. Thank you, Graham. It's been so lovely speaking to you and catching up in a bit more detail, having sort of known each other on the edges of things for so long. So thank you for joining me. Tell people how they can find out more about you and connect with you.
Okay, so you can find me on LinkedIn, Graham Frost's Heart-Shaped Decisions. If you just Google Graham Frost, I normally come up the top. There's a few other Graham Frost, but I normally come up on the top of Google if you look for me. You can email me, graham@grahamfrost.com, or you can even call me on the telephone on 07766 916 317. And I like talking to people and listening to people. So thank you very much, Joe, for giving me the opportunity to come on. It's been lovely.
It has. Thank you so much, Graham. All this information is available in the show notes. If you go to powertolivemore.com/ in this case 175, then you'll find them there. And this week I'd like to talk about automation. We talked about it at the Counterpoint Networking meeting on Monday, which, in case you're interested, is every Monday at 2:00 British Summer Time. And you go to counterpointnetworking.co.uk and you can book in for that. It's free. It's aimed at coaches and consultants. It could be anybody really, though. Everyone's welcome. So feel free to come. Next week we're talking about business books. But this week we were talking about automation. And we talked about some of the automation that people had already got set up and some of the tools that people were using to automate work. And one of the things I said at the beginning was how important it is to not automate bloated rubbish systems. So one of my 5 fundamentals is about systemizing, and the idea is to systemize your processes first, make sure they're as slick and with ease as they can be, and then automate them from there. And one of the tools that's really useful for that is Zapier, which is a tool that connects 2 or more apps or websites, softwares, whatever it might be, in order to enable you to do something in an automatic way. And some of the examples I gave, which I've shared before, are things like the fact that I have my Pocket account connected to my Buffer account so that I can share useful content that I read literally just by tagging items in Pocket, and they automatically get added to my Buffer account and then shared on my social media according to the schedule that's on there. Also, things like my podcast. I have a link that people can use to book, and it takes them to Time Trade, which books them into a space in my diary, and then it creates a diary entry. It also creates a Zoom meeting, and then it also creates a draft email for me to send to confirm the booking with the individual. And I only create it as a draft because I want to just double check that my diary hasn't done something mad before I confirm it. You can just get it to send that automatically. And then when people are getting close to being interviewed, I ask them to fill out a Google form and I send them a link to that. And then I use Zapier to connect that to Capsule CRM, which is my CRM system, and it adds them into that with their bio and various bits of information. And that also, in a separate automation, adds those details into a form that my show notes people use in order to write the bios as part of creating the show notes. So one of those things triggers two different pieces of automation. And so we spent quite a lot of time talking about Zapier. We also talked about Text Expander, which is a tool that you can use on all sorts of devices to take a sort of short piece of code that you type in and it extrapolates that into whatever it was you intended to type. So some of the examples of when I use that myself is when you book for my podcast or the Engage for Success podcast, or you book a meeting with me in the diary. I can't remember the link to send you to do that, but I have a Text Expander code set up. So, for example, if I'm sending you to my podcast booking, it's #PTLM for Power to Live More, PTLM radio, and that expands into the link that you need in order to get the booking sorted. When I'm working with Engage for Success, we often get people asking if they can write for our blog, and I just do #, I'm not doing very well today, am I? # content reply, and then a whole email appears in the email, which says, thanks for getting in touch. We accept guest posts. Please read this link here to find out the editorial guidelines, and we look forward to receiving that content. So I don't have to retype that every time I get that email asking to contribute to the blog. I can just use Text Expander to reply to them really quickly. And there's tons and tons of examples of how you could use that as a tool. So that's really cool. And then we also talked in quite a lot of detail about Aweber and how you can use tagging in Aweber and a whole host of other email tools in order to kick off campaigns and basically slice and dice your mailing list. So we spent quite a lot of time talking about that. One of our attendees, Anwen, mentioned a quiz tool that she's been using as a lead magnet on her website, which we've talked about in previous podcasts and also in the networking and in my membership. And she was talking about how it's automated so that people get added to her list and she can send them emails and so on. So quite a lot of tools shared. The one that I didn't share at the meeting, which I should have done, is something called SaneBox, which is how I automate my email so that I don't have to spend too long sort of trawling through all my email. Basically, SaneBox organises what comes into your inbox into different folders so that you only have the really important stuff visible and the rest of it you can go to when you have more time, and you can train it to recognise what's important and what isn't and so on. And then the final thing to talk about is a really cool tool that I've started to use a lot more than I did in the past, and it's called otter.ai, and it's for your phone and you can use it for transcribing. So I've written blog posts using it where I sort of flesh out the outline of what I am going to say in the post, and then I literally speak the post and Otter types it for me. What I didn't realise until a couple of weeks ago is that you can actually have a paid for account with them, and I think it's about £10 a month, and then you can add audio and video into your account, and it will automatically transcribe it for you from there. And you can do it through a Dropbox integration. So what I've been doing with my podcasts is just literally copying the MP3 of the interview into my Otter folder on Dropbox, and then a period of time later I get an email to tell me that it's been transcribed. And I also used it in Counterpoint Networking. So we've started to take the section of the meeting where we talk about the topic, so in this case automation, and chop it out so that I can put the video onto the blog post that I write for the members afterwards to say this is the conversation. But I also dragged that video into my Otter folder, and that transcribed it. So for those people like me who don't like watching videos, and certainly I don't like watching videos back that I've been in because I was there, I don't need to see the whole thing again. But I might want to find a little gem, a little nugget of discussion that was in the middle of it. And it's so much easier to scan through a document with the transcription and just find that bit. And, I might need to go back to the video at that stage, but actually finding where it is in the video is really helped by the transcript. So I'm having a bit of fun using Otter to think about how I can provide, more information and more help to my audience and my tribe, if you like. So our networking people get the opportunity to look back at the video when we have had a discussion, but also to look at that transcription. And I used to have transcriptions of my podcast available, and I stopped doing them a long time ago because it was proving to be quite expensive to get them done. And now I'm going to add them back into my site because it's just, easy to do with Otter. So I'd definitely recommend that as a tool as well. So that was automation this week. As I said, next week we're talking business books. So if you're interested in coming along, please do go to counterweightnetworking.co.uk. And if not, I'll be talking about them and what we discussed on next week's podcast. And then just to finish, I can't remember if I've said before on the podcast, but I've intended setting up for ages a discount code for loyal podcast listeners to join my membership site. And I checked today and I have already set it up, so I may have mentioned it before. But if you're interested in getting some really practical support from me around being successful in your home-based coaching or consultancy business, so whether that's help with your website or your email marketing or getting more sleep or being more productive, sorting out your emails, or even just that you are trying to do something like perhaps sort out a campaign for your emails and then you've got stuck and you just can't sort out whatever that thing is, I'm sure I can help you. If that sort of opportunity would be of interest to you, then if you go to powertolivemore.com/getcalm, you can enter the code podcast and you'll get access to the membership site for £1 for the first month, and then it's £37 a month after that. And as I say, it's there really to help you get unstuck, to help you to avoid overwhelm, to help you to learn things that will be helpful for you in your business, and also to get involved in the community and work directly with me. So if that's of interest, it's powertolivemore.com/getcalm, and the discount code is podcast. And so the show notes again for this week's show are at powertolivemore.com/175, and we look forward to speaking to you next week.
Use your power to live more.